Sometimes it's helpful to see the process of digitizing from the very start to the very end. We have other videos talking about the digitizing process and how all of that is planned out. We have individual videos on the use of each tool, but to see from start to finish how that kind of works its way out is super helpful. So I'm going to digitize the same design that we planned out in that digitizing process video. It's that Earth Day. You have it available to you if you want to kind of follow along, practice on your own. It is in the designs folder that is loaded with your software. It's just a BMP, so we're doing raster. We're not grabbing vector elements and kind of converting them. We're going to do everything from scratch, start to finish. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that we need to do, we know, is get the design on screen or get the artwork on screen. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to go to my graphics folder that's in my designs folder that's loaded with my software, and I'm just going to grab earthday.bmp, and I'm going to open that up. All right, so this is a nice, clean graphic. It's a really nice way to start. Unfortunately, some of your graphics may not be this clean, but this is a great way to start to practice. All right, the next thing that we need to do is we need to scale this to the size that we really want it to be. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to type 3.5. I'm going to hit enter to scale that. Now in the process video, we decided that the sky would be first because it's going to be in the background. Then we do the top mountain, then the middle mountain, then the bottom mountain. All of those would be fill. Then we'll do the water, and there are a couple different ways to do that. I think we should look at those and see what's going to work best for us, but I think fill is probably what we're going to do. And then you can do the trunks or the treetops or the sun first after that. All of that's kind of up to you. I think I'm probably going to do the trunks first and then the tree tops. Then we'll do the sun. I will do the rays as satin and then the center as a fill. And then I'll look at kind of dividing up that outline. So let's just come in here and start. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to grab my complex fill tool. Since the majority of the fills that I'm going to be doing today are only going to have one stitch direction, I'm going to be using the traditional input method, which is this first one. It's just a little bit faster since I'm only doing one stitch direction and I don't want to answer a lot of extra questions. It's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to trace around my edge, and you'll notice that I'm not following the edge perfectly. I'm overlapping a little, and if you touch the edge of the screen, it will scroll for you. If that makes you crazy, you have the ability to turn that off. So I'm going to finish my shape, and I'm watching along the bottom. It says input next point or hit enter to finish the element. I'm done, so I'm going to hit enter. Now, do I want to put in a hole? I could. I'm probably not going to. I don't think that there's enough stitching here to warrant going back on itself. So I will hit enter, and now it's asking for my entry point. So I'm going to go here. My exit point, I'm going to go here, and then my stitch direction. I'm going to come across, and I'm going to try to figure out, is there a stitch direction that does not make me have to meet up with myself? And I think this will do it. Yeah, I think that did it. And now I will come down and I will grab a different color and I will digitize this top mountain. And again, I'm overlapping quite a bit, and that's just going to give me a cleaner sew out because I'm going to go back over all of these with that satin stitch for the edge. Trace around my design, hit enter. I don't have any holes, so I hit, and I'm looking down here for my instructions. So I hit enter again, my entry point, my exit point. So pay attention to what I just did there. I'm moving from the center to the edge. I'm pushing away from things I've sewn. And then I will give it a slightly different stitch direction than the sky. So if I put this in 3D, my colors aren't exactly what I'm looking for, but I tend to digitize in somewhat contrasting colors. All right, so I'll take that back out of 3D. And then we'll do the next one. So we'll go to a really light pink. This one may not show up well, but that's all right. So I'm pushing down, I'm pushing away from things I've sewn before. I don't have a hole. Entry, exit. This time I'm going to change my stitch direction a little bit again. And I'm not just going up and down because I don't want it to fall into the grain of my material, and typically fabrics have a vertical grain. I'm going to grab another pink, and I'm just getting kind of close with my colors. I can dial those in later. If I dial them in right now, I tend to have a hard time digitizing because I can't see what I'm doing as easily. I have no holes for that, so entry, exit, and I will match kind of the top mountain. So now if you look, I've got slightly different stitch directions. It's going to catch the light a little differently. And we'll make this a lighter blue. All right, now let's come in here and digitize. Let's digitize the ocean next. And I could digitize this whole piece as one. And I will push away from that and give it a stitch direction like that. Oops. Pay attention to where your insert is. I inserted right after the sky, so I'm going to drag this down because that's really not what I wanted. And I will give it a darker blue color. Let's go to 3D so you can see that fill. If I do that, it gives me kind of all one direction, one kind of very flat color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this and I'm going to lock it, and we will come back to this. I'm going to digitize over it, and we'll look at this in a few different ways once we get that outline over it, so you can see the difference in kind of what our options are. And I'm going to grab a bright green just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. So now I'm going to start digitizing again, and I'm going to trace around, but this time I'm going to do each set of waves. I'm just digitizing around. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to end here, and I'll give it this stitch direction so it's different from the sky. And then let's do this again. If you wanted to, I suppose you could do the same thing with a giant unifill method and put these all in as splice lines. That would be one way to do it. So I'm going to end here. Well, I'll start here and I'll end here. That will generate a travel stitch and come back, so I'm always pushing away from what I've done before. I'm going to give it a different stitch direction, and now I'm going to grab my walk input method, and I'm going to travel along that edge to come back down here. And then let's do this piece. So I can do the whole ocean part, or I guess it could be a lake, I don't know, without a trim. I'm alternating my stitch direction every set of waves. Coming around. No holes. I'm going to start here and I'm going to end on this corner, and I will give it a stitch direction like that. And then let's do this last little bit. We'll come back around. So I will start here. I'll end here, and I will give it a stitch direction like that. So now I'm just going to merge that back up into that blue so that we get the right color. And if I go into 3D, I zoom out, you can see that even though it's the same color, it starts to look slightly different. So I'm using one thread color, but I'm giving it a a good amount of dimension. So let's go out of 3D. Now I'm going back and I'm going to start dealing with the trees and the sun. Now with this, I'm starting to digitize on top of stitching, so I can have a little bit of trouble seeing what's underneath. If I want to, I can hide that color or that element so that I have much easier access to what I'm digitizing. All right, so I think we'll do a column 2 for these trees. I'll do this little guy, move over and do this one. And we'll just grab a dark brown. So I'll do one side, then the other. Give it a stitch direction, and then I will travel. So I'm walking instead of trimming. That's going to save me some time on the machine. And then I think we'll go up with this one. Give it a stitch direction. And I missed with my travel, so I can move that to line that up. Adjust my travel stitches. And now that I'm done with that, I will go in and I will do the green of the trees. So I'm going to grab a bright green so we can see it, and I'll change it later. So I'm going to digitize this tree. I have no holes. I will start here, I will end here, and I will have this stitch direction. Maybe. Should probably look, yeah, okay. So I just turned on my sky to make sure I'm not lining up to the stitches that are underneath. So when you are dealing with layering stitches over one another, typically I like to avoid having them line up, because if they line up exactly, then the stitches on top will start to sink down into the stitches underneath, and it kind of buzzes your edge a little bit. If they are at 90 degrees, the stitches on top can pull a gap in the stitches underneath, and so I don't particularly like that either. So I tend to just go at slight angles to each other, and that tends to work well for me. So I got that in there. I looked at my stitch direction. I did want to go in and see what was underneath, so I turned the sky back on for a minute, double checked it, that was looking okay, I turned it back off. If it's not, you can always edit your stitch directions later. Alright, so I've got that piece. I'm then going to, I've got one tree, I'm going to insert a trim, and then I'm going to do the other tree. And I'm holding Alt to snap to completely horizontal for the bottom of that tree. Hit enter to close the shape, enter again because I have no holes. I will start in this corner, I will go up here, and I will have that stitch direction. So they're slightly different from each other, just to give them a slightly different color, just from how the light hits them. I'm not doing it with different thread colors, and now I'll make those darker again, closer to the real thread color. Alright, so now I'm going to start dealing with the sun. And with the sun, I am going to travel down. You know what? Let's do this in a bright orange so we can see it a little bit. I will travel down, and then I will satin back up with a column. This too, you could choose to do with a unifill and put splices for all of the rays, and that's up to you. And then I will travel down the next one, satin back, and I will continue to do this through all of these rays. And oftentimes, if I don't get my travel stitch just right, or my entry and exit for my next piece just right, you'll see me go in and edit these later. I don't worry too much about am I dead on where I think I am. I try to get very close, but if it's not perfect, I know that I can change it later. This time I started with what in my head is the wrong side. So if I were to hit enter now, it would exit on this side, and I want to exit on the other side. So I'm going to hold control and hit enter to cause it to exit on the other side. And I'm going to continue with these rays. And by doing it in this fashion, I will have the rays be overlapped by the center of the sun a little bit. But what I will also start to get is kind of a nice difference in texture with the smooth satiny rays and then the step pattern in the fill of the body of the sun. And anytime I can add a little bit of sculptural difference or textural difference in my design, I'm probably going to, just because it ups the visual interest of that piece. Now this sun, you can kind of figure out where you're dividing things just by looking at it. If I needed to, I could go in and add vector lines to my design if I have that option available to me in the level of software that I have. I can add vector lines to make those divisions, and we'll do that with the outline just to make it a little bit easier to see what we're really doing. Continue to travel around, out, and I'm coming back in. And yes, I am pushing towards things I've sewn before, but I've already stabilized this area with the sky, so I'm not as worried about it. I'm also doing it in little bitty bits, which causes me to worry less. All right, so 2 more left. Here again, I started on the side I want to end on, so to exit on that side, I will hold control and hit enter. If you can't remember that, that's not a big deal. You can go move your exit point later. It's just a tool or a keyboard shortcut that I use quite frequently. All right, so I'm almost done with these rays. Last side, come back up. All right, and now, there we go. And now I'm going to grab the fill tool. I'm also going to grab the circle input method because I just want to make this easy, and I will click on one side. I'm going to hold Alt to make that be a perfect circle. Click on the other side. Now one thing that you want to be careful of is the stitch direction and the entry and exit point, so I do need to change that. I want to enter here. I'm not sure what I want my stitch direction to be yet, so let's go look at the sky again. The sky's got a very vertical stitch direction. I would probably, so here's what the sky is doing, so I'll come a little bit off of that. So I start here, I probably want to exit at the far end here so that it pushes all in one direction, doesn't meet back up with itself. And now I have a very orange sun, which I probably need to change, so I'll make that be yellow. Don't have a yellow in my quick, so I'm going to go to color. I'll just grab a yellow. All right, so now I've got the majority of all of my major elements in. But now I need to start dealing with that outline. So I'm going to collapse all of this down. And I don't want to forget that I have 2 oceans. I'm doing this for an example. I wouldn't normally do that. But what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to hide everything so that I can see just the outline, because that's what I'm going to deal with next. And then to make my life a little bit easier and see those edges a little bit better, I'm going to use a pen with white ink or white color, it's not really ink, with my vector line so I can start to see these divisions a little bit better. So I'm coming around so I can see those edges. So there's one of those, and then let's do the other side of this. And the other side of this. Because I need to break this apart into multiple pieces. I want to see where those pieces are. It is not uncommon for me to add vector lines to my artwork just to make things a little bit clearer for me. All right, so now I'm going to scroll to the bottom of my list, select the last element, and then click on the tool that I'm going to use. And I'm going to do this in bright obnoxious green just so that we can see it. All right, so now I'm going to, I think I'll work back and forth. So maybe I do a wave and then one mountain and then this mountain and then this wave. I don't know, we'll figure it out as we go. So I will start here, digitize around. So I'm doing this so that the waves go under that horizon line. You'll also notice how I'm kind of changing my end pieces, and what I'm doing is trying to keep my stitches from overlapping at 90-degree angles. So I know that that top stitching, I'll go back, I know that my top stitching is probably going to have an angle like this, and this piece would probably have an angle like that. So I'm trying to get somewhere relatively close to that as I'm going through, because again, I'm looking at that, you know, bicycle spoke kind of stitch direction for those curves. So let's grab this piece because that's the last piece I did, and let's go into the next one. So I need to travel down, and then we'll start this piece. Come up. Wow, I missed with that edge. Sorry guys, I'll have to fix that. I'm gonna angle that a little bit. Yeah, I don't like what I did there, but I can't work on it right now unless I redid the whole thing, which you could do, but I'm too lazy for that, so I'm going to edit it in a minute. Give myself a couple stitch directions. There we go. All right, so really like what's happening here because, again, bicycle spokes for that outer piece, and I want to make sure that I don't pull gaps. Here, I'm going to bring this in a little bit. I'm going to take this out of 3D so I can see the edges. There we go. And I'm going to start down here. I'm going to move my travel stitch to go a little bit farther. There we go. That'll work. All right, so now we have that piece, and let's start with this next piece. So we'll come down here. And I will come up. So yeah, I'm not lining things up exactly, and that's because I'm trying to get a little bit of overlap, because as stitches pull, they'll pull in, and I'm trying to kind of cover up anywhere that it might pull kind of funny. So let's go ahead and give these stitch directions. And then let's travel down to here. And we'll come across. Do this piece. And occasionally you'll find in designs where you try to make it a little more perfect, or you exaggerate it a little bit more so that the final sew out is more defined, because people aren't going to see the original art. They'll see your sew out. So they're not judging what it is in relationship to anything, they're just looking at the sew out. So what you may find is you exaggerate some ends to make them show up a little bit more, things like that, just to make it a little bit cleaner for the final sew out and make your embroidery a little bit more impressive. All right, so now I'm going to finish this up, this piece. So we're doing the last wave, I think. Come over here, come down, up. So I'm curving through all of this. I'm trying to be a little bit faster, so if you're digitizing a little bit slower and a little bit more accurately, good for you. I would do that too typically if I'm not being recorded for you guys to see it later. All right, so now we've got the last bit, and I don't know that I love that, but we'll see how it plays out with the overlap. That might be something that I edit after my sew out. I'll come up here, because I've got the last mountain to do. I really missed there, but I realized it ahead of time, so I just hit backspace to delete that last piece, or that last input point. Come down. All right, same thing up here. All right, coming down. There we go. Stitch directions. And then I will travel down. So now that I've got those done, I'm going to do this piece. So I've got those done, then I will do this piece, which will cover up all of these little edges, and then I'll do that final piece. So this is where that vector line can kind of help some, seeing that division. I think I'll go there. I may have to change these ends when I get that final top stitching on there. It may have to wait till after I do a sew out just to see how those stitches overlap and if they're pulling gaps. So I might try something like that. Bicycle spoke. All right, so now this last bit is this lovely perfect circle that's the same all the way around. So I could go in and I could digitize the inside of the circle and then the outside of the circle. But instead, what I think I'm going to do is use a single line column, which allows me to put in one line, match it up exactly, and then tell it the width. And it will do that all the way through the form, so it's just a time saver for me. All right, so I'm going to grab this single line. Now, I typically grab the wrong one. I have 3 here that I can choose from, left or right or center. Since I'm not really sure which way I'm going to go, I'm just going to grab center and adjust it later. And then I will grab my perfect circle, automatic circle input with my single line, and I'm going to go on, I think I'm going to go on the outside. Hold Alt, have that perfect circle line up. Click. All right, so that's done. And now I can edit this shape. Now this is going to look really bad for a second. I'm going to grab one side, whoa, and then I'm going to grab the other side of my width here so that that goes across. So that's the same width all the way through the form. I'm going to right click, go to properties. I'm going to go to single line, and I'm going to choose left, and I might be right. Wow, that never happens. I got it right the first time. If it's not, just change to the other one. All right, so I've got my width. It's the same way all the way around. So now I can just change this to, that's not black enough for me. So I'll go in here and I will say, I want this to be 1800. There we go. All right, so I'm going to collapse this down. I'm going to show all of my colors, and I'm going to hide all of my artwork. And then I'm going to put this into 3D so that we can see what this looks like. And that's looking pretty good. I really like how the ocean looks like it's going back and forth. Now, if I were to change this so that you only saw one direction, you can kind of see that difference. So there's one way. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this and move it over so that you can see the difference. So on this one, I will delete these pieces. And on this one, I will unlock that so that I can delete that, show everything. And then, so there's the difference in the two different oceans. One, you've got just a completely flat fill on the left. The one on the right, it has a couple of different directions, so it's kind of highlighting the movement of that water. But then I would go into my properties. I think I like the two different directions, so I'm going to delete this. All right, now we'll center this up. Now I would go in, go to properties, double check my tie stitches. I would look at my underlay. Since I'm using some of the defaults in here, I've got auto underlay on. I think that's going to work very well for me for the majority of my stuff. Now, under the trees, where you're dealing with layers of stitches on top of layers of stitches, you might want to back that off a little bit. Otherwise, it'll start to get kind of thick. But I've got my underlay, I've got my tie stitches. You might add a point or two of pull offset just to kind of combat some of that push and pull and the stitches sinking down in a little bit. But once you get all that done, you would go File, Save it as whatever type of file you want. I would save it as the OFM, that way you can go back in and edit it later. Very good way to do that. If you are saving as a stitch file for somebody else, that's completely fine. Just make sure that you save yourself an editing file, an OFM, first, and then save a EXP or a DST or something like that for them. All right, so we just digitized from start to finish Earth Day. I would suggest you get into your graphics folder and start digitizing with some of those in there, or some of the more simplified logos that you may have waiting in your inbox. But get in there, play with it, and see how digitizing works for you.